My name is Michael Owens. I'm the executive producer of SLIF, and we've got an awesome webcast for you today on this episode. We're going to be talking about a very important topic, and the topic is organizational culture. And the clickbait title we went for today is, does culture really matter? We all know that having a strong culture is important, but in today's highly competitive labor market, how much does culture really matter, specifically comparing it to wages? And what really is culture? Now, culture gets talked about a lot, similar to topics like wellness, and often gets lumped together with mission and vision and can mean different things to different people. So I went to the Google machine and looked up what the definition of culture is. And according to Google, organizational culture is a system of shared assumptions, values, and beliefs which governs how people behave in organizations. These shared values have a strong influence on the people in the org and dictate how they dress, act, and perform their jobs. So we know that this is an important topic, and that's why we decided to pull together today's episode. But before we bring together today's panel to the screen, it's time for a shameless plug, because we're also going to be talking about this topic at SLIF Spring coming up May 22nd to the 24th in Napa. And if you're interested in learning about that, go to SLIforum.com. We still have a few spots in order to join us. So that's enough about that. And on to today's guests. We've got an awesome panel, as I said, and we're going to be joined by Tana, Gall, who's president of Merrill Gardens, Rustin, Becker, who's the president and CEO of ERDMAN, Todd Petty, who's the vice chairman of Lloyd Jones Senior Living, and Charles Turner, CEO of Kare. So let's jump into it. Our first guest is Tana Gall. Tana, you there?
Hi.
Tana, you there?
Hi, Michael. Great. Thank you for having me today.
Great. And for the audience, where are you coming in from? And it's a little reversed here. Lara, is it possible we could switch screens? There we go.
Oh,
all right.
There we go. I am coming to you from Seattle.
From Seattle. Great.
Yeah.
And just for the audience, I know most people are tuning in or familiar with Merrill Gardens, but can you just give a little background on the organization, the size, and yourself?
Sure, happy to. Merrill Gardens, based in Seattle, Washington. We have 70 retirement communities across 20 states. We offer Merrill Gardens, which is the traditional senior living, and Truewood by Merrill, which is our moderately priced product we rolled out about a year ago. We offer mostly IL and AL. We have some memory care too, just the whole gamut.
Great. So, I want to add, just so people tuning in, just to understand the format here, we're going to interview each guest and then we're going to come together for a discussion on the back end. So if you have any questions for the panelists, and also if you have any comments, please throw those into the chat now. Don't hold them to the end. We want this to be interactive. If you decide to tune in live, take advantage of having access to this great panel. So what I want to ask each guest is, the topic is, does culture really matter? What's your answer to that?
I think it absolutely matters. Culture is important right now. We're in such a competitive labor market. It makes it important, but it's always been important to me. I think it helps in your recruiting, but even more importantly, I think it helps with your retention. Mm-hmm. To me, I would add to that definition you said, culture to me is a company's why. We all know what people do, but to me, your culture is why you do it. Mm-hmm. And so that's the only thing I would just add to that. I think, when an employee can identify with a culture, it gives them something to hold on to.
Yeah, 100%. So you've been in the industry for 28 years, started at Leisure Care in the PR department, which is great to kind of show the trajectory of how you started your career in the industry, which we can talk about. But, what is the biggest thing that you've learned kind of looking back about, about how to build a strong culture?
Well, I feel very fortunate. I have worked for the majority of those, 28 years have been at Leisure Care and Merrill Gardens, two companies in this industry that have very strong cultures and have forever. But what I will say about culture, in my experience, is that it takes dedication. It's more than words. Somebody that I really, was a mentor of mine for a long time, just made it very clear to me that, words on a wall are one thing, but it's actions. It's really people getting behind who you want to be as a company and then living it and showing it. So it's words, but it's putting those words into action. And I think, when you see employees that are sticking with you and they're really defending that culture, you've got something really special.
Yeah. So, you hit on something there, mission statements and visions created in a boardroom
Mhm.
are great, but how do you get that to the frontline staff and get them to buy into that? What are certain things that you're doing at Merrill, today to really kind of, and to get your communities to embody the culture that you want?
It's everything. It's everything from head to toe. From the minute that somebody interviews with us, making sure that they're aware of what that culture is to work at a Merrill Gardens community, to what their onboarding looks like, and then kind of the ongoing check-ins with employees when they start working with us. And then we're just making sure we're always living it. And if we're not, we want people to call us on it. One of the initiatives we've rolled out for this year, our kind of theme for the year is up our game. We want to make sure we're doing everything we've always done, but just try to do it even better. And to get to all of our employees, we've really kind of gamified it for the year. And
Yeah.
so this Q2, you're seeing Merrillopoly visual there, where we are taking the things that are important to our culture and we've kind of put it into a game. And so all of our communities have their own game board. And the one you're seeing now was from March. That was a community one where not only are you doing the things that you should be doing, but you're kind of upping your game and making it better. And then teams were competing with each other and we could share this. That one, no email Sundays, that was a big deal. That was on the ops director's board. Just things like this that, we just don't want to forget. Show your home office some love. That means send a card, do something nice. So you can see it's some really important things like no life safety tasks overdue, but things like, do something to cheer somebody up. It's really kind of just put it front and center of how important that is to us. And as I mentioned, it got our communities talking to each other. It got our team members talking to each other. And it's been a lot of fun to kind of realize that we're working with a lot of generations now. You've got Generation X, we've got baby boomers, and we've got millennials. And we've found a way to kind of communicate with all of them through some of these fun things that we're doing. And again, it's about our actions. Our words are in there, but it's about our actions.
100%. That's great. And I guess, the thing I'd also like to ask you is, how are you measuring? How do you measure culture and whether things like the gamification that you're doing is
Yeah.
actually, improving, employee satisfaction scores?
Well, there are things like the employee satisfaction score that we're always looking at. And then, there's things like I can look at Google reviews, I can look at Glassdoor reviews and see if we're actually, people are writing about what we're doing. And I think it's a lot about just making sure we are delivering on our mission. Do our actions fit with what our culture is? When, I find it interesting to listen to my cohorts or listen to business partners explain Merrill Gardens. Are they explaining it in words that I think fit with what our culture is? And if they are, then I know we're doing a good job. If they're not, I know we probably need to retool things a little bit. So it's looking at kind of every level.
Yeah. There's a question that just came in, and I think it's a good one just to kind of talk now. Is how do
Yeah.
you maintain? And I'll actually read it. It's
Okay.
how do you maintain a uniform culture across dozens of different locations, facilities? I think that's I guess the challenge there. Um,
That is a
and
challenge.
especially looking back over the last 2 years.
Absolutely. I became best friends with videos, which I never dreamed in a million years I would. But like you mentioned, the last couple of years, I like to be in the buildings. I'm out at least every other week in our communities, talking to people. I like to do what I call roundtables, where I go in at night and I meet with the knock shift, I meet with the late shift, and we just talk. And man, for the last couple of years when I couldn't travel, I relied heavily on video. I felt like I could get my tone across in a way that was
Mhm.
different than in an email or something in writing. And so that was certainly a part of it. I meet with our general managers every Monday on a Zoom call. And, sometimes our meetings are 10 minutes just to kind of check in and see how people are doing. Other times they might be a little meatier. We had a Merrillopoly meeting last week. It went a little bit longer. But for me, it's the general managers are a real key component to culture to me. They're the ones setting the tone in their communities. And I think a lot of people would say, when you walk into a community, you can tell the personality of a general manager or executive director by how the community feels. So for me, my focus is very heavy on that executive director to ensure they're getting what they need. They're representing me, they're representing Merrill Gardens.
Great. That's something we're going to talk about a little bit later, specifically when we get to conversation with Charles Turner. But you mentioned the videos, and I told you this the other day. I wasn't sure if it's Tana or Tana. So normally I'm not sure of the pronunciation. I go on YouTube. I'm like, there's got to be an interview, or maybe you even say your name. And I found a bunch of the videos that you did during COVID, which I thought were really good. They were genuine, which is really important. But you didn't say your name in half of them. I guess it just was written down below. So I watched most of it until I found one that you did.
Okay.
For the audience, it's Tana, like Montana.
That's right.
So we only have a couple minutes here left before then we get into our next guest, but of course we'll come on the back end.
Sure.
Labor challenges are not going away. Are you doing anything creative to address this? I know that, I guess one thing that I am aware of is the resident experience partner position that you guys created. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to share about that. I'm really excited about the resident experience partner. Actually, it came about kind of prior to the labor crisis. When we were creating our moderately priced product, Truewood by Merrill, a part of that is not ever lowering our quality, but instead it's delivering our product in a more efficient manner. And so we came up with this job description of a resident experience partner that, kind of started back from the days of 28 years ago, having a universal worker. Universal workers were somebody we kind of plugged in where we needed them. And we kind of threw that out the door and said, how do we get people in and put them on a career path and cross-train them in such a way that they become far more valuable to me, and they can just do a lot for the residents. And what's been really fabulous is, as we started, we would still recruit for whatever department they need to be: housekeeping, server, dining, whatever. And then when people would come in to interview, we'd say, how interested are you in maybe learning some other things? And so we would get people excited about that up front. And then they'd come in, get trained as a server, but then maybe they would learn something about activities or front desk or maintenance. And what's been really fun about watching our reps kind of grow is that the job satisfaction has increased dramatically. And so I was talking to a rep the other day at one of the communities, and she said, my day just goes so fast because I come in, and I think she answers the phone at the beginning, and then she gets to do activities in the afternoon. And so just when she's, maybe starting to get bored or things are getting monotonous, she gets to go do something else. And that's where we're seeing, the satisfaction of the employees is higher. Now we can actually recruit for resident experience partner, and we're getting people to apply for that job. So that has helped us out dramatically. The more people get cross-trained, the more money they make. So, to me, it's all about, can we get fewer people to do more and pay them more, because there's just fewer people out there. And so far, so good. It's not without its hitches along the way, but it's working really well for us.
Well, and it creates a path for growth too. And they can maybe go from PR department to president at some point. So
that's the goal. I just did a video for him the other day and said, someday one of you could be me. So I believe in it wholeheartedly.
Great. So I wish we had more time just to talk one-on-one, but there's a bunch of other questions that we didn't get to, but we'll save those for the end. But thanks, Tana. We'll see you like I mentioned, at the back end of this discussion. But our next guest is Rustin Becker. Rustin is the president and CEO of ERDMAN. Rustin, how you doing?
Good. So great to join you, Michael.
Rustin, so you are not a senior housing operator. So can you share for the audience a quick elevator pitch? What is ERDMAN?
So ERDMAN is a 70-year-old organization. We're exclusively focused in healthcare and senior living. We provide consulting, architecture, engineering, development, and construction. And over those 70 years, we've completed a little more than 6,000 projects across the United States. Excellent. And my personal background is in architecture.
So Rustin, when we were having a conversation a few weeks back, you had shared with me a little bit about ERDMAN, that you guys, I don't know the exact dates, but at one point in that 70-year history, you guys went public, and obviously it had gone private again in 2012. And at that point, you realized that something you need to work on, I guess the going public and then going maybe shook the culture a little bit. And since 2012, you've put a lot of emphasis on building a strong culture. And I was really impressed with what you shared. And so that's why we're here today having this discussion. So can you share kind of that what happened from 2012 and where you guys are today?
Yeah, as you noted, when we went public, we really saw the culture of the organization change dramatically. And so in terms of going private again, it really became a key focus of the senior leadership team in terms of how do we advance a very unique and different culture in the space that we're in. I've been in this space just under 30 years, or actually it probably is 30 years this year. And when I started in this space, it was really more about, what's your technical competency? How do you practice as an architect or an engineer? And over that 30 years, what I've really seen is now it is much more about your experience as you navigate through the process. And that experience is a direct reflection of the way that our team members behave, the culture that is the foundation of the organization. And I think as we've navigated those 10 years, a couple of key takeaways is really realizing, if you want to move culture, in a large national organization that has deployment in a lot of different areas across the country, you have to make it strategic. And so culture is one of our 3 strategic pillars. So one is around markets, one is around services, the third is around culture. The second key takeaway is really make sure you have the right leadership team in place. You have to have a leadership team that firmly buys into this being an equal priority to those other pillars in terms of the commitment they're going to have, in terms of sustaining a focus, in terms of making sure that team members are modeling the behaviors that you need to have to be moving that cultural goal along. And then I think the third is really how do you make it relatable all the way down to the team member? So our vision is about improving every life we touch. And I think our employees can connect with that periodically, but behaviors that are the values that are the foundation of the culture, they're much easier for them to connect to day to day.
So I'll give you a plug here because I've heard this, we, for the audience not familiar, Influence Group, our main organization, we produce a lot of events in design, architecture, and construction. And in healthcare. And I've heard from people that have worked with ERDMAN that, they can actually, of course, as you mentioned, technical skills are important and that's what people are hiring you for, but they can tell that the culture is different at ERDMAN compared to that. And so I want to get into measuring too. That's a key thing. And I know that you guys have measured this. It's not just saying, hey, we have a great culture. So we do have some graphs and I definitely can't explain it. You're gonna have to explain it for the audience.
Sure.
Lara, if you could bring up the human synergistics graph that we have.
So when you have
what are we looking at here?
Yeah, so when you have a company full of architects and engineers that love to measure and be analytical, a tool set around how you measure culture is pretty relevant. So we started a partnership several years ago with Human Synergistics. It's an organization based out of Chicago, and they have a methodology for measuring culture, also for measuring leadership impact. And they do both of those types of modeling around what they call a circumplex that you're seeing on the screen here. There's 12 components. I won't go through all 12, but the ones that are highlighted in blue are considered constructive behavioral styles around achievement, affiliation, those types of things. The green ones are passive defensive styles. So that usually shows up as avoidance or people not pursuing conflict to get problems appropriately resolved. And then the red ones are really aggressive defensive styles. And so this oftentimes shows up as behavior in terms of individuals when they're struggling, having kind of a very bold over the top response. And so as we ventured through this journey, we measure our culture broadly across the whole organization. And we also measure the impact the individual leaders have. And so what you're seeing first here is how did the leadership team of the organization evolve? And so you can see back to 2017, the blue was barely at that kind of 50th percentile, was dipping below in some areas. And as we've moved out to 2022, we've made some changes in the leadership team. But at the same time, when we meet every 6 weeks, we talk about how have we modeled the behaviors of our culture over the last 6 weeks, and what are we going to be doing going forward over the next 6 until we meet again. And so big growth in the 2022 number. And then as you look at the organization as a whole, that becomes a reflection of what you're seeing as the change in the leadership and the way that trickles down in terms of an impact perspective. And so 2016, it was smaller. It grew to 2020, and we'll measure that again in July of this year.
Interesting. So for the audience tuning in right now, I'd be curious to know if you're measuring your culture and leadership, and what tools you're using. If you don't mind putting that in the chat, I think we'll be there. And there is a comment from someone that said that love working with ERDMAN, great group of dedicated professionals. So it translates to other people in the industry. Actually, I think that's your assistant, Rustin. So onto the another thing is, I did read an interview that you did in Senior Housing News, and there was one quote that stood out to me. It says, "We're building a culture where individuals feel empowered with a strong sense of affiliation to the organization and each other." And I think the other part, each other part, is key. How do you get your teams to have that strong affiliation with each other?
So it starts really with where we interview. So, we don't look at technical as much as we look at behavioral, and then it works through the onboarding process and how we work with individuals in terms of the way that they're going to model behavior. But what we ultimately do is fairly complex. We've got different disciplines working together. There's going to be certain points where there's a bit of conflict in the process. And so what we need is individuals to model a way that they approach that conflict around what the problem is and not what the individual is. And so if we can model that, or get teams to model that behavior, the bonds that they have with each other will increase over that. The other piece is we've layered in what we call the ERDMAN Experience Group. So that group focuses on a lot of other types of things in terms of how can we work with team members to get a sense of community impact? How can we work with team members in terms of their long-term educational growth perspective? And we have the Excellence Program where they nominate each other as peers and select each other as peers in terms of who's modeling that behavior well.
Okay, nice. I guess the next question I have for you is recruiting. How do you consider when someone's going to fit within the ERDMAN culture? I think that's a tough one, right? Because making bad hires is expensive and can obviously shift the culture. So how, now that you've figured out how to measure your current team, how are you making sure you're bringing in the right people that fit in?
Yeah, years ago, our interview process was much more technically driven in terms of what do you know about architecture or engineering, those types of things. Now, we've actually redesigned our job descriptions. So technical is only 40% of your job description. Values is 40%. Leadership is 20%. We have different competency levels within each of those. And so we start at the interview process, instead of asking them, how would you model this wall detail? It's like when you worked on a project and you had a team member that didn't fulfill a commitment they had made to you, how did you engage with that other team member in terms of getting that resolved? And so we use a behavioral based approach to interviewing, and then we monitor that with stay interviews and those types of things as they onboard with the organization over the first year.
Great. And we just got one more minute here. The obvious thing is most of the audience that are tuning in right now are senior housing providers, operators. What do you think that this audience can learn from you? If they're not in construction engineering.
I think, to me, the biggest takeaway potentially that translate across all industries is the way that it connects back to your customer or your client, however you want to define it, resident experience. Every organization that's out there has an approach to providing care. I think they're all striving to do that in the best way possible. But ultimately, what that resident experience is what is the culture of that organization. And so the way that an organization can differentiate in a competitive market where we're looking to restore occupancy and those types of things, I think is a great component. And it also is very effective in terms of recruitment. We've been able to recruit successfully throughout the pandemic.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing. Obviously, Rustin, we'll talk more in just a short, but while I have you here, thank you, ERDMAN, for being a strong supporter of SLIF since the beginning. You guys have been great, and we love working with you guys. So thank you for allowing us to continue to do this. Our next guest is Todd Petty. Todd Petty, Vice Chairman, Lloyd Jones Senior Living. How's it going?
Hey, Michael, it's doing well. Thank you for having me on the webcast today.
Yeah, excited to have you here with us. So I'm going to ask you the question. In today's competitive labor market, how important is culture over cash?
I love how people frame questions. It's always like, is it cash that motivates these new team members coming on, or is it culture? And I both are important, but I'm a big believer, as Tana is, in the culture in the building. You described culture in the very beginning. I wrote some things down that it's values, it's behaviors, it's beliefs, it's attitudes. These are very intangible things, but these things that are intangible come out of people, the people you hire, your leadership team, the policies, the things you have in place. They come out of a person and they affect the atmosphere. And the atmosphere you create in your building determines the product you're producing and determines your unique value proposition. So culture is extremely important. And I don't think there's any one answer to it. It's stacked, and there's things you have to do to deliver it properly in a community.
So I want to ask a similar question that I asked to Tana is, you've been consistently in the senior housing business. I guess you started your early career at Genesis, right? But consistently for 20 years, starting with Matrix Healthcare Development in 2020, then Kare, Thrive Senior Living, Mainstay, now Lloyd Jones for the past 3 years. What is the biggest thing that you've learned about building strong cultures throughout this time?
Yeah, so Michael, I've had the privilege of being with different companies that delivered a different, focused on a different part of how you build a good brand. So I've been in communities or companies that focused in on innovation. I've been in companies that, was married to tried and true operations. So I've come to the conclusion, and what we're trying to do now for the new future is to take tried and true operations and blend it with innovation and create a Renaissance moment. When you think about the Renaissance, it was the Judeo-Christian philosophy blended with the future that created this Renaissance in world history that had just so much new innovation that came on. And, I know folks are like, hey, we're just going to be about tried and true operations. We're going to be good operators, and they resist the innovation. And so it becomes very plain, very vanilla with no magic within their businesses. But I've also seen people throw out tried and true operations and say, we're just going to be so innovative. If the glass is looking good, we're going to break it and we're going to rebuild it, and we're going to be cool and hip and just have innovation. And then we lose out on tried and true operations that we need, to have a good foundation in our communities. So we need both. We need to blend both to create a culture in our communities.
So what are certain things that you're doing at Lloyd Jones now to create a strong culture?
Yeah, so I think it all gets back to
on the frontline workers, especially.
Yeah, and it actually gets back to having the right people in the right seat. How do you attract people into your communities, that are going to be there long term to help create this culture? And first I would say, if you look at the people that are the leaders in our industry, some of the best leaders came from starting positions of dishwashers, housekeepers, CNAs. They started at a very entry level, worked their way up. They were motivated. They decided that this is the career they wanted to be in, and they found a pathway. And they're some of our best leaders. So I want to find a way that I can attract people that have a pathway similar that Tana spoke about, that can grow and mature and become leaders in our industry. So we have to have a strong vision to attract those folks. Having the right people, attracting them is very important. So if you look at the people that love to work in our industry, Michael, they all have capacity to serve. They all love serving. They can serve a long time, and they go to bed at night putting their heads on the pillow, knowing they did a great day's work. But if they're not celebrated, they're not reinforced, they're not edified, they're not recognized in their communities, they can get really burned out and they can leave on you. So you have to find ways to celebrate that community in the local level. And so what we try to do is wrap our business very similar to how you'd wrap a personal development company might wrap itself in. So when our team members come on board, one of the things that we've introduced to make them feel part of our communities. And I think, do you have the slide we could show our audience?
Yeah. So I was going to talk to you about that, your rule of 5. So if you can talk us through that, but before we get into, I also got, I know that you have a podcast, and the podcast you did at Lloyd Jones, your first episode was actually abandon the vision statement, replace it with the rule of 5. So let's talk about that. Abandon the vision statement.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity over the last few years to visit almost 200 communities, and when we talk with people in the communities that we were looking at acquiring, they're asking them about their mission and vision statements. There was a real disconnect. They weren't aware they had one, and at times I saw the mission statement on the wall. And mission statements are great. We have one, but sometimes they are built in boardrooms, and they're all about how the company's valuable, the company's unique value proposition, and the team members that are coming in and actually serving our residents, they want something in it for them. And so we're trying to create an environment for something for them. What are they going to get out of this experience? And we came up with the rule of 5. I mean, most people have stand-up meetings every day where the leadership team comes in and they discuss with one another problems going on in the community, what needs to be addressed. So I like to call these the morning huddles, because our leader has to meet with the team and set the pace for the day. And one of the things we like to do is take one of these rules and talk about how our team members in the local community are engaging in one of these rule of 5. So if you look at the rule of 5, one is lead. We lead ourselves to fulfill our purpose. Number 2 is we grow. We want to be growing in some form or fashion. If you look at number 3 on the slide, it's create. We're creating best-in-class senior housing teams, and we're chasing excellence in all we do in number 4. And we serve our clients, colleagues, partners, and community. And what I'm asking my team members to do is I want you to think every day how you can just grow. I don't care if it's just slightly. How can you grow to be somebody that you're today now but weren't yesterday? I mean, a housekeeper can make a decision that they're going to clean an extra room. A business office manager can decide that they're going to log on to a portal we have for continuing education and figure out how to help them at home with their own finances. But just grow. These are the 5 things we seek to do every single day. And growth, if it's done every day, down the road, really transmutes into an experience that just status quo won't give you. So again, people, go ahead, Michael.
No, I was going to say, we just showed those cards. So those cards are distributed to all employees. They're metal cards. Is that?
Yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, it's just no different than when I get my American Express metal card in the mail, right? Membership has its privileges, or when I become a Delta member and I'm given just a few things that differentiate myself, we like to give this card to our team members at the local level. It's a metal, it's a black card. It's Lloyd Jones Senior Living. And on the back of it, it has the rule of 5. It has the 5 things we try to do every day that we want them to do and join us in this effort. It has a chip inside of it, so it allows them through RFID access to different areas of the community. And it allows them to purchase things at our communities through the point of sale system. And I can't tell you, when we're just giving something as simple as this, how that makes them resonate with the company, how it empowers them. And it's a reminder every day. This Credo card's a reminder of what we're asking them to do for us, even if it's something small on their level.
How much do you charge them when they lose it?
Nothing charged right now, Michael.
Obviously, just joking there.
I know you are.
So, again, just on time, I want to bring up another thing, because you just last week posted an article on LinkedIn titled "Words Matter." I think we can drop it into the chat, or you can use the Google and type in Todd Petty "Words Matter." In it, you said that by using very deliberate words, we can change the way we view things and the atmosphere we find ourselves in. Can you explain what your thoughts behind this with the audience? And
yeah,
we can also bring up an image to show.
Sure, all these things are very important, and being by themselves, they might not add up to something very significant. But when you begin to stack them and add them to a community in your business, it all begins to change your environment, because it's changing the paradigm of your team members. It's changing their philosophy and how they view the world. And so this is just a few things I've been doing for 20 years. The words do matter. I mean, these are not our employees. These are not, these are team members. These are team associates. Everybody is a member of the team. We all might make different salaries, but it takes the entire team to get the ball across the finish line. Mm-hmm. So we avoid, our staff, our employees, from a corporate standpoint, we're the service center. We're the home office. Our job is to support the community, and we let them know that. That's why we prefer to be in the communities versus pushing direction out. because that's our job. You know, on a pyramid, we have an upside down pyramid where our chairman and our board is holding everybody up. And the very top of that pyramid are the people that make the greatest difference. And that's the housekeepers, the cooks, the dishwashers. Those are the most important people. They represent us, and we need to pour inside of them. These words do matter. This is not a facility, it's a community. And look, it's not even a respite stay for a resident. It's a short-term stay. It's not a break from the families. It's a short-term stay in a beautiful community.
And, you know, one thing I'll note, and I think it was the blog post that accompanied the original podcast about vision statements. You had a good, I guess, analogy there about hitting a tree with an axe just 5 times a day. And then, you know, it could be a big tree or a small tree, I guess, you know, thinking about a large organization or a small organization, but you may not do anything, you know, just hitting it 5 times a day, but in the long term, you may knock that tree down. And I thought that was kind of a good way to talk about all these little small things all do add up and contribute to, you know, really kind of putting, you know, the mission and values at the forefront to obviously transform the culture. So thanks for sharing this with us, Todd. And as I mentioned, we do have a bunch of other questions, a bit more provocative ones that I think will be better to discuss as a group. So speaking of provocative, I think we have our final guest ready to join us, Mr. Charles Turner from Kare.
Is that today?
Yeah, you're here, man.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
How's it going, man?
Good. How you doing?
Good. So same thing, you know, as I did with Rustin. For people that are tuning in or not familiar with Kare, can you explain to them what Kare is all about?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, my background is actually as an owner, operator, and developer of senior housing. Todd Petty and I go way back. He and I partnered together in numerous buildings. And he's, you know, I learned most of what I've ever learned about senior housing from Todd. He's been an inspiration and a true cultural leader. Since then, the last few years, several of us in the industry, a lot of the operators and real estate groups came together to create what is Kare. So Kare is, think of it kind of like an Uber-like platform, but instead of a driver, it's for nurses and caregivers to pick up extra shifts in senior housing communities. So, you know, our value prop is very simple. You know, we don't set the pay rates. Our customers set the pay rates. So we're usually far less than agency and overtime, usually around the same price as a fully burdened FTE. You choose to come to your building, and if you like our heroes, you can hire them for free. We're actually encouraging you to hire them. A lot of our customers use us as a hiring tool, kind of a try before you buy sort of thing.
Great. So the question that I asked, you know, each guest at the start was, you know, what's more important, culture or cash? And Kare has actually done some research on this topic. So I'd like to bring up a graph here, and Charles, if you can kind of talk about us on why do caregivers go? What motivates them?
And so, and a lot of this, right, is the nature of the conversation is culture matter. You know, just because of, you know, we're now in 30 states and work in hundreds and hundreds of companies and thousands of buildings. You know, we have tens of thousands of people that work on our platform. We can actually ask them a lot of questions. So we've been able to do a ton of research on a lot of different things. And this is the results of one of them. This is part of a whole white paper. You can go to our website, is, you know, doyoukare.com. That's Kare with a K. Kind of go into the news section, and you'll see some of our white papers. We're about to come out with another one as well. But we ask basic communities, and we ask caregivers the exact same questions. Like, you know, why do people come to work for you? Why do they leave? And to see where they agreed and where they didn't agree. And so, you know, this is kind of a zoom in on the previous slide. There's a whole bunch of stuff we went into, but the biggest things and some of the biggest areas of disconnect where we have between communities and frontline caregivers are, you know, the question is, does culture really matter? And honestly, the answer to the question is, it doesn't. I mean, not the way we define it. Again, as an operator, I was always struggling with, okay, we had a great culture as an operator, you know, down to the activity director. And then our frontline, you know, our associates wouldn't get what we're trying to do. And so this data kind of reinforces why. When we think about culture, you know, we think about a religious culture, think about an ethnic culture, and your definition, Michael, of, you know, shared values, you know, rituals, things like that holds very much true. I don't know if that actually really applies to when you get down to the frontline worker level. that culture becomes much, much more individualistic. We tend to look at culture corporately, and I don't mean as a business, I mean as an aggregate. In reality, culture is a very individualistic thing. So like, you can throw that slide back up there real fast.
Yep.
One of the things that we showed is, why do people leave your community? Well, I think everyone agreed, generally low pay was a big one, but this is where we had a big disconnect. So disrespect from management, poor company culture, facility culture, and lack of teamwork from coworkers. Turns out for a frontline caregiver, that's the exact same question. Those aren't three questions. Now, for us it is as an operator, but for a frontline caregiver, those are the three. Those are the same thing. Culture to them means respect, is a matter of individual respect, not what are the shared values of this company. They don't. Those values tend to be a lot more abstract to a frontline worker, because for them, their culture and their reinforcement is, how do I give care? Like, are you respecting me for giving care? And so that's where we started. We do a lot of coaching, just completely outside of care and what we do. We do a lot of coaching with companies on where you need to focus on and to improve your culture and pivot it from where you think it should be.
Yep. I just see somebody asking in the chat, are these slides available? I think Charles mentioned they're on the Do You Care website. And just for you guys tuning in, we will make this available on the SLIF blog after we air this. But just going back to that though, because if you have, pay as the number one thing, and then number two is, the reason why people leave is number one is pay. Number two is disrespect for management, and three is poor culture. Wouldn't you lump disrespect for management and poor culture together, and then somewhat and isn't that culture? So then wouldn't that trump pay?
It doesn't trump pay. So actually, if you go to there's another slide that has a circle on it. We asked this question again. We asked communities essentially. Go back to the previous one there. The previous one from that. Yeah. Do you have a great culture? Not this one. That's okay. I'll just talk through it. Do you have a great culture? And the community said, yeah, we really do have a great culture. And if you look at this, the caregiver said, no, you really don't. And really what this question asked, this is not the specific question. The question was, as a caregiver, would you accept 10% less in pay if the community had a great culture? And the overwhelming response from the community is like, oh yeah, they would take less pay if we had a great culture, as we define it. And the caregivers were like, yeah, no, we're not taking less pay. We'd rather, it's a Maslow's hierarchy of needs problem, which I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but that's what's driving it. For us, for a caregiver, they expect you to have a great culture, meaning they expect you to have respect for what they do as an individual human being. And if you don't, then, I'm just going to go down and I'm going to make more money someplace else.
So I think this is going to be a good discussion point when we bring the whole group together, because I see some people that are echoing what I just said, isn't that kind of culture? And I guess it gets into the definition of culture. You and I kind of joke about things like wellness. People like to say things are, and there's a lot of different definitions of wellness. If you want to talk about a culture, Kare has a very unique culture. I mean, your advertising is agencies suck. You guys wear bright colors. You're very bold, energetic, different from a lot of the organizations that we just had on, the earlier guests. So for you, for the Kare culture, how are you actually working to find the people that fit within, this startup basically?
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny. It's kind of a cool story. We started Kare in early 2019, and then obviously the pandemic hit early 2020. And when we did, we had there were 6 employees total in March of 2020, and 2 of them in the U.S., 4 were in Mexico, at a big operations center in Guadalajara, Mexico. And we had started a great culture, but just 6 of us were all doing everything. Fast forward to today, I think we have about maybe 120 employees all over the globe, in multiple companies for a variety of reasons. And the really cool thing is, like, our turnover, anywhere from kind of a frontline associate at Kare all the way to senior management, our turnover has been very, very, very low. And I'll answer it from my perspective. It'd be interesting talking to other people, but I think one of the things that we established early on was this sort of like an us against the world sort of mentality. And yes, everything is orange. Everything, like, what you're not seeing back here is the general obnoxiousness. I mean, you got this, or the seat I'm sitting is orange, that thing's orange, or that's orange, whatever. But there's sort of like, we're all in this together, it's us against the world mentality. And so when that works from a corporate culture, again, this reflects what I did as an operator a little bit. But again, that kind of ends at that, call it activity director level, maybe the dining director level. You know, that culture, I don't think our culture at Kare does not necessarily fit you know, for a frontline caregiver. However, those frontline caregivers who work on our platform, a lot of them is like, hey, this is cool, this is really different. They're starting to adopt that because, gosh, this is a different way than we've ever thought about working before. I want to be associated with something kind of cool. And we get a lot of that. We're actually about to put out a bunch of content here in the next few weeks and months, just video content reflecting that we were actually surprised that our kind of corporate culture has started to infuse itself into, you know, the people that work on our heroes that work on our platform.
I was going to say, you call them heroes, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we did that before. It was cool. Just so
you know, we've got 12 minutes to the top of the hour, and we may go over a few minutes here because, again, we can keep the conversation going and put up afterwards. But, you know, actually, you know what? I have a question that I think I want to ask you, but I'd also think it'd be good to bring the whole group together. So with that being said, let's bring the group in. Everyone's still there? You guys are all awake?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So Charles said some things, I guess, maybe run a little counter to some of the discussion there. So anybody want to comment on what Charles just said? Maybe Todd, since you guys know each other, you can maybe...
Yeah, so I'm going to provide some data for Mr. Turner because I know he's a data geek and I respect that. So, and I'll say this quickly, the Wall Street Journal ran an article and they surveyed 1,000 people that had left their jobs for more money. And 250 of them regret leaving their jobs. They had opportunity. They liked where they were at, but they had opportunity to leave for more money, and they did. And now they're finding like it wasn't worth it. The company I was with had a great culture. They did what they said they were going to do. And look, I think making sure that management is exercising a good environment and they're acting on integrity and making sure there's not bullies in the workplace, that's culture. You have to be proactive about that. But anyway, people do regret leaving for more money. And I think culture has to be in play because money is a temporary motivator.
Yeah. Charles, you got a response to that?
I agree and disagree. Like we do have some evidence what Todd's saying is true. I think, again, going back to, I'm taking this strictly from a frontline caregiver's perspective, right? So when you get to those sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, food, clothing, and shelter, there's a base level. I'm not sure that necessarily holds true, you know, in our environment. Like as you kind of go up the economic scale, and we have other data that we can talk about later that reinforce that as you kind of go up the pay scale, then there is a trade-off of compensation and culture. But when the further you get down, it's really, we're not seeing that in the data.
So let me suggest this. You know, I think you can break culture down even further in an organization because, you know, if we're talking about a company having a plan that makes it attractive, or it's got a great vision, or it's got a great mission, and we're trying to attract caregivers, I agree with Charles that probably is not going to work because ultimately they want to know what's in it for them. But if the company can create a culture that engages them, that they're a vital member, and that the company exists to help them promote, help them succeed, help them have a career path, because we know if we're doing that for them, we're going to get a good team member. And if the team member's needs are met, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then they are going to give back to our residents. The residents are going to be happy and they're going to stay, and I'll have less attrition. So I think it has to be, the culture has to wrap the team member around it to celebrate them and make them center, not the company.
Yeah, and the slide that we didn't show reinforces that 100%. So if you go back to what we showed about the lack of respect being after pay, the respect and culture are equivalent to a frontline caregiver. And so if you say, well, the question was, we wanted to dig in, well, what do you mean by respect? What does that mean? And we had our own assumptions of what it meant. But what it turns out to be is, you know, the biggest one by far was not listening to my ideas, and then the second one being micromanagement. So that's roughly 50% of the reason why someone feels disrespected is because, just like Todd said, you're not treating me like an equal, right? I have my own opinions, thoughts. I'm a human being. Stop treating me like a commodity. Treat me as an equal. Like, I don't care about T-shirt Tuesday. I want you to treat me as an equal. Then that's the number one thing. And then the other slide, we don't have to show it up, was the number one person who shows the most disrespect in the building happens to be the executive director, right? I thought it'd be like the DON or staffing coordinator. No, like by far, like if you're going to work on culture, work on how to get your EDs to treat your frontline associates as an equal. Like that's the first quick win I would attack.
Tana, I see you nodding in agreement. So do you want to add anything? That's my cue to go. All right.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with that more. It kind of goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning. The executive director, the general manager, sets the tone, is the carrier of that culture. And if you don't have that, person carrying the flag, there is a lot of disrespect or turnover. I see that over and over.
And I think you did some of that with Blue Harbor, right? With True Blue, we didn't talk about that.
Yeah, when I think, when you're coming to a new company, stepping into a new company, and again, I haven't done it that many times, but even when I came to Merrill Gardens in 2013, I knew the company had a strong culture. I just, as a new employee, wasn't sure what it was. And so one of the things I did is I did a culture survey, and I sent it out to all team members. I sent it out to the home office. We sent it out to families. We sent it out to residents. And we said, what is it like to be a part of Merrill Gardens? And collected that data. And again, that to me is how you create a strong culture. Is you don't make it up in a boardroom. It's made up of the people. It's made up of who you are as a company. And so that's where, at Blue Harbor, we came up with, our line for them was 100% True Blue. And we found out what that meant to people. And we really kind of drove that home. And so, I'm a firm believer in this stuff comes from the people that you hire. And my big hiring secret is, I hire people that are nice. I can train them on a lot of other things. I can train them almost everything, but I can't train nice. And that's sort of the passing of a new employee is whether or not I think they've got the heart to do the job. I can train the other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that sums it up. Hire nice. Rustin, one thing that I wanted to ask, I guess each of you, but Rustin, I guess we'll start first is, we talked to each of you about certain things that you're doing that are working well. But are there certain things specifically related to culture, and now even, 10 years on in this journey at ERDMAN, that you still struggle with? I mean, no one's perfect, and there's no one size fits all. Is there one area that's still kind of an area that, that you guys struggle with?
Well, I think, one of the things that we've seen more of late is, being based in Madison, Dane County, with a large portion of our team members, we had to go virtual in basically 72 hours. And I think the culture we had gave the organization a lot of resilience in terms of working through the change that we're experiencing and those types of things. But, I still think we're a bit challenged in terms of, where we bring team members on, and we bring them on, quote, virtually. So we had team members that we were FedExing laptops to call them up with the passport or the password to get into it. It's been challenging for them to, I think, experience the depth of the organization around culture. And that's a piece that we're still going to need to work on as we continue to grow and deploy team members in broader areas of the country.
Anybody else want to share something that you may struggle with?
I hold on to culture suckers too long. Sometimes, those people that just suck the culture out, they may be technically good at their job, but if it's that one rotten apple. And I would say one of my biggest mistakes is just holding on to those folks.
That would be a great Saturday Night Live skit.
Well, one of the things we show from our data, which is very counterintuitive, I think, Tana, you may have mentioned it, this culture of accountability. Like, one of the things we coach companies, like, we are in the middle of the biggest staffing crisis we've ever faced in our life. And the best thing you can do is fire the worst 10% of your employees in terms of retention. Because the one thing, I'll tell you this, that we asked this question, 150 people, what's the one thing that pisses you off more than anything when you walk into your community? out of 150, 100, so 2/3 of them said, I hate it when I have to literally clean up the crap that the previous shift didn't do. And so, that's a management problem, right? So we can solve that. Like the HR people and the DONs need to figure out how you use your EHR the way God intended. You do that and create a culture of accountability. That's a huge other quick win.
Yeah, and that's the demoralizing thing when you have a mission statement or you have values and it's on the wall and it's about integrity, it's about excellence, and then you got a situation that management doesn't want to deal with, or even upper management doesn't want to deal with. They let it go, and your team members notice that, hey, there's this big disconnect between what you say and what you do, and it demoralizes it and it erodes your credibility. And so that is some, again, it's and then you also have, the pressure of, well, if you terminate this person, they can file a lawsuit on you, they can make something up, and it's going to be painful, but you've got to embrace the pain to protect the organization. And then one other comment I want to make, I think the biggest challenge is replicating as you grow. And I remember having highly successful communities with this guy named Charles Turner, 10 years ago, riding around day and night, visiting all these communities and being able to beat the drum and protect the environment and being culture champions. But as we grew, it became harder and harder. We had to have people come in and do that, and it starts to dilute and it becomes more difficult. So you got to have your finger on the pulse. You can't let go. You've got to beat the drum every day.
Yeah.
So what about, someone that, and again, there's no silver bullet here, but for someone that's acquiring a portfolio of new communities that's coming into that, some of these communities don't have a great culture. What are some suggestions that kind of get started right away? If anyone wants to jump in on that.
I think it's just leading by action. We got 6 new communities on Friday on April 1st, and we made sure on day 1 of transition that every team member had their name tag, had their business cards, that we had welcome signs, that they felt loved and embraced on day 1, and having team members in there to basically talk about culture and talk about who we are as a company, and just bring them along on just starting on day 1. And then I'm a big advocate too for, seeking to understand too, go in and don't go guns a-blazing on this is who we are and we got to change, but, go in and learn who the people are, but set that foundation of what the culture is moving forward. It's worked for us.
We're just almost out of time here, and just looking to see if there's any questions. If you do have one, throw it in. There was some in there commenting that this is recorded. This is not. We're live. But with that being said, I know we're coming up on time here, and anything else that you guys want to add in? I mean, we're talking about a topic that we actually did a discussion on this a couple of years ago with Denise Scott. I don't know if you guys know Denise Scott at Drive, and she claimed that it takes about 5 years to really right the ship if you have a poor culture, which I thought was pretty eye-opening, specifically kind of a way that a lot of the organizational structures, especially with capital partners and the way the transactions happen in this industry, things can kind of come and go. But do you agree with that? I mean, it's I guess, Rustin, you can, to saying you've been working on it now for years.
Well, to me, what's interesting is I would say it takes years to build it and it takes moments to destroy it. Where we merged with a public company and, there was a different expectation around culture and behavior. Once that expectation around how people behave goes away, that can dissolve very quickly. And then the time that it takes to put it back in place is very slow. That's part of the reason we measure it every 2 years, is because it doesn't move fast enough to really see it in 12 months, even though we'd all love it to. It just takes a while.
Yeah. Charles, do you want to add anything there? I saw you, I'm going by some cues. Or
someone's at our door. No, I think I don't know if 5 years is right. I think in the public domain, like taking over buildings, we've done that before, things like that, and getting over bad perceptions will probably take 5 years. I don't know if it takes 5 years to adjust the culture, but one of the things that I do highly recommend is to to survey your own employees. I mean, that's one of the, we survey tens of thousands of people every few months about whatever. Ask your employees anonymously what's important to them. You take over a building, like what's good and what's bad. I mean, that's you learn a lot and where your quick wins are.
The other piece I would add, Michael, too, is I do feel like there's a snowballing component here. Once you get it rolling, it does tend to go a little more easier.
Yeah, and I would add, I don't think it's a 5-year deal at all. I think I was going to say it takes a long time. It might take a year. I don't think it takes 5 years. I mean, you think about, Michael, why do people come to Senior Living Innovation Forum? Oh, because we're connected with everybody. There's energy there. There's first-class venues. There's events. It's positive. We learn something. We grow. That's culture. That's you creating a culture that attracts people to get an outcome. And I believe that could be done in any community anywhere in the world and make a difference.
Yeah, Laura, did we get that? Can we bring up the logo now to promote the event?
Sincerely.
There we go. Shameless plug. Well, listen, I want to thank you all for joining us here for this discussion. I think there was a lot of great insights, and I can see that in the comments here. I apologize. There were a lot of comments, and if I missed any questions, Tana, people were asking, hey, is there any way we can get a copy of those boards? Maybe you want to start selling them on the Merrill Gardens website?
I know.
Get some additional revenue. There's interest in that. And people asking about Charles' slides. As I mentioned earlier, there's some white papers, and I think you said you have some research coming out even further. But again, while we have people's attention, thank you to ERDMAN. ERDMAN is the sponsor of this webcast, and also they'll be at our live event. So if you're not familiar with the awesome work that they do, thank you, Rustin, and definitely go to erdman.com to learn about their services. And last but not least, if you like to listen to podcasts, Todd has a very good podcast that you can find episodes on all the different podcast outlets, and also check out his most recent blog post on why words matter. So thank you guys so much for joining, and hope to see you in person soon. And we'll be back with another episode of the Community by SLIF in the coming weeks. And if you have suggestions on topics that you'd like to see us discuss, please throw that into the chat as well, because we're always looking for some new ideas. Thanks, and have a great day.